shares haven't reacted quite so positively. There are complaints that the prices have gone up from what they were on the black market. What's your response to that?
Well, so I guess the price on the illicit market is actually not cheaper. Most of the people coming into the stores have been so actively impressed that I think everywhere in Canada will be sold out, if not by the end of the first day, probably by the end of the second day. And the difference in price is one thing, and our prices, I think, are on par. But what you get in the illicit market, it has a lot of sprays on it. Not everybody washes their hand properly, so it has a lot of other things you don't wish to have. And the illicit market is going to find in Canada that it's not going to be easy to do that anymore, because they put in real punitive measures that if you're a landlord hosting them, it can cost you several $100,000 a day to be a landlord. And if you're caught selling it to youth, it can be up to 14 years in prison. So what is happening in Canada is we're regulating and educating, and the price and the product quality, et cetera, I think are quite strong, compelling reasons to switch.
So how do you expect demand and sales to evolve?
Sorry, could you say again? I couldn't hear you well.
How do you expect demand and sales to evolve?
Well, I think it will normalize probably as we get into early 2019, that we can keep up. But at this point, everything in stock is selling. The lineups have been, frankly, around the block on day one, or e-commerce stores have been absolutely flooded. And then what happens is we get into Q1, we start to see more and more stores opening across the country, so there'll be more and more access. And then the second half of 2019, the government's going to introduce and enable us to make quite a large range of products that include vapes and beverages and edibles, we expect. And if they do that, we think that's going to drive a whole bunch more demand. So it's going to be quite a cycle for the next 2 years.